What's good? Today I've got a message for you. And the message is about shadow work, narcissistic, psychopathic abuse. So it's the same topic as always, right? It's about a true vision that I once had. Don't ask me about the circumstances of this experience. Important is what happened. And for giving you the context for this visionary experience that I had, you need to know at that time I was working at as a gardener in a small gardening company, and I was, it was a small garden company, and I was, as always, a high performer. And there was one man I was working with, a colleague of mine, and he everybody regarded him as the heart and the soul of the company. He was such a good man, full of heart, full of soul, always trying to please everybody, performing, doing the stuff, trying to optimize the processes, everything, fully invested, doing the thinking and the planning for the company. So in this company I was a high performer, and the young men, we had always young men, students who wanted to earn some money, and they worked with the company and they enjoyed the spirit of mine. Also, they called me Berserker, so this was my nickname, the Berserker, because the spirit of mine to perform just because I like to perform, always being laser focused, always pushing. They started to enjoy the spirit and started to enjoy working. So it made an impression on them. They like this spirit, okay, to perform. All right, now, in this vision that I had, I saw this man that is the heart and the soul of the company, and I saw that he tries his very best in all his attempts. And I started crying. So in this experience, I started crying tears. I was crying tears, okay? I also saw my children when I felt a form of this, unconditional love. But it was connected to this man as well, where I saw that everything he does his best, okay? He does his best. And still, in this man that everybody regarded as just such a good person, I bring forth the worst in him, a form of a shadow in some way, okay? How did that happen? Recently I made a video about it, the last video. I found out my shadow. My shadow is repression of grief, probably. And also due to a, childhood wound, a lack of protection, a lack of nourishment, probably. Therefore, I have the mentality to be a high performer. I have to do it all on my own. This is the David Goggins mentality, all right? And this is why I was the berserker in this company. This is what I am, who I am. I perform on a very high level every day, absolutely consistent, because I love to do it. I do this unconditional. I'm an unconditional high performer, and I do not demand the respect that should be connected to the performance, okay? A normal person performs, and if they get the respect and the money and the recognition and are allowed to reap the fruits according to their efforts, then they perform high. But if they are not allowed to reap the fruits, if they don't get paid that amount of money and so on, they don't demand the respect, then they don't perform that hard, which means they have a conditional way of performing. I did not have that. I was an unconditional high performer. I did not demand respect and recognition. It went to the degree that I was pushing from early morning when everybody was, hey, go slow, what's that? We have time, we have time, we have time. And I start pushing, making very good, solid work. And everybody goes slow, enjoys the scenery in the forest, wherever we're working. And then the boss is coming on the scene. Everybody starts being laser focused, performing faster. It went to the degree that I started, because I found this is false, something is wrong here, you know, I perform all the time this way, this laser focused way. Now the boss comes and now everybody goes faster, and I was like, okay, now I go slower. So it went to the degree that I inverted that, and this gives me, of course, these Heyoka vibes of this sacred clown, mirroring, you know, doing things in reverse and mirroring to people what they do. Now, to what does this lead to? When you're an unconditional high performer that does not demand anything for that. Seems like here's a traffic jam. That's not good. Let me see. All right. I don't know what I do now. Maybe I follow these people. Maybe they have a shortcut or something. Let me see what they do. So this leads to bringing forth the shadow in the best of people, because this man, the heart and the soul of the company, was threatened. You can go. Was threatened by the fact that I was able to outperform him in every single task, but I got paid less than him and I did not even compete with him. This led to a feeling of being threatened by my presence, because he knew the boss sees this. The boss offered his company to me, by the way. The boss sees this and knows, hey, Julian, if you just are a little bit more organized and you put in some more effort in here and there, you know, you could have everything. But I was in the same pattern as always. No, I can't. No, I can't. I have to perform. I have to function. I have private problems because I'm in my private life already in the high performing mode where I try to save people, try to save everything, try to perform, have to do it all on my own. You see this loop? I can't grieve, therefore I perform very high. So it's a loop that is just going on and on and on. So this created a threat for this man, because there is someone who can do everything that he can do and is not asking that much recognition, that much money, does things even more effective, more simplified, is physically in a much better state, is younger, and so on, all right? And this creates in the best person in the world, this creates anxiety and at least indifference. When you get in problems, they will say, oh, I'm sorry, this man has to go, but it's one less threat for me, okay? If you would ask for, in other words, if you would compete more, if you would be more competitive, if you would demand respect, if you would settle the hierarchy, if you would invest, if you go in, you would not have these problems. That's the interesting thing. In other words, you bring forth the worst in people when you're an unconditional high performer, all right? So why do I say this? Because it's a trauma response from early childhood, all right? It's a repression of grief. That's what we found out on the channel. And it leads to problems. It leads to problems. And if it brings forth the worst in good people, because they feel threatened, and yeah, they see there's someone who can do everything I do, and he's not even asking for anything for it. This person is not good for me. It's not good for my business. Okay, so if you bring forth the worst in the best of people, of course you bring forth the worst in a covert narcissist anyway, right? But this is this pattern of hyper functioning as a response to this circle of a repression of grief and taking care of oneself. All right, let's get back to that vision that I had. So I saw this man that, you know, the best man, and nobody has any doubt in his morally alignment and a good person and everything. But this person becomes in some way competitive and envious of me because, you know, that's why. And then I cry because I see that he is just doing what a human being would do. He is normal. In other words, it's normal what he does. All right? And it's not normal in some way what I did to be an unconditional high performer. That brings forth the shadow in him. And I was crying for this. I felt a love to mankind for being as flawed as it is in some way. And this, by the way, enabled my ability to cry again. I realized in this moment I haven't cried in 20 years or something. It's completely not there. And since then, I can cry, but for others. So it's completely the opposite of why narcissists and psychopaths cry. All right? So I think narcissist cries out of self-pity. Psychopath can cry also out of self-pity. So they cry for themselves because they are the broken child. They are wronged. Everybody gets everything wrong. And that's why they cry for themselves. Not for their children, not for another person. They cry for themselves. And also to manipulate, to modify the behavior of another person. This is what children do. If a child is not agreeing with the behavior of mother, they cry. Until mother finds out what they need. And when they get it, they stop crying. So they successfully modify the behavior of mother. There's different reasons for crying, but these are some. But what I do is I cry for others. All right? I have also the tendency and I have had short bursts of the feeling that I could cry for myself, but I quickly realign. I quickly switch back to functioning because I don't have the time to grieve. I don't have the time. I have to function. I have to fight for my children. They're coming from the same background as me. I have to settle things. I want to be a daddy that is protecting the children. I want to be a parent that nourishes the children. I'm not indifferent. I'm not trying to create an abandonment trauma in my children. You know, all of this is not me, okay? So I try to be different. Therefore, I have to keep functioning. But it's also a loop. It's also a loop that keeps me stuck at where I am. As long as I don't find ways to process grief, it does not have to be crying. No, it's not gonna happen. I'm not going into the forest doing some uh, shamanic drum sessions, ecstatic dancing, heroic journeys, and cry with men and frustrated managers, and then I find my wild masculinity is not going to happen. No, there is non-narcissistic ways to do this. No, I'm not going into the Amazon to an ayahuasca ritual with all the managers of Silicon Valley just because it's hip. It's not going to happen, okay? I find less grandiose ways to do this, e.g., having a non-monetized YouTube channel where I talk about these topics. All right. So I had this vision. I saw this man that is that must be a healthy, normal human being, and even he got scared and competitive towards me because I was not scared. I was not even trying to compete. I was simply unconditionally outperforming everybody. But this was a threat to him. So it's a lesson for me. This was a lesson, and it took a good person to teach me that there is something wrong with me if I do this, okay, in some way. So I have the problem of hyperfunctioning, and what this also does is it makes me identify with pain. A person who does this, like David Goggins, also means you identify with the pain, and you also might have problems to let go of the past, because at some point you see the reason for when it happened, that this competitiveness of people started towards you. When did it start that people first use your quality of being a high performer and then discard you because they get scared of you or envious or anything? And it happens with the best person as well as with the worst person, okay? Even, of course, the covert narcissist, the covert narcissist is a person that is utterly impotent and infertile in a way that they are not able to function. They are dysfunctional, not functional. Their life does not bear fruits. So now, as a compensation, they have a false self that they act out as a compensatory mechanism of omnipotence and superiority. Of course, a person like that does not enjoy to be around a person that is not competitive, does not act out any omnipotence fantasies, but is extremely potent and fertile. Of course, a covert narcissist can't be around such a person. Makes sense. Even the best people will find it in the long term a problem to be around that. It's as if people, if you're around David Goggins, imagine that this man is constantly pushing much harder than you, is constantly running outside and say, stay hard, who's going to carry the logs and the boats? And you're just having a bad day, you're just taking a few days off, you're just chilling on the couch, and it just makes you feel even worse. You feel like, hey, this man, understand, this is the problem. But David Goggins has a part of this. I have a part of, or I also have part in this. I need to we need to understand the real value of a human being and the purpose of a human being, and the fact that a person is lovable, worth loving, is not hardwired to their performance, is non-performative. As a child should be loved by mother and daddy unconditionally without performing. All right? And it should not be abandoned and not protected, and it should not be not nourished. Because otherwise the child will decide probably to become a high performer and do it all on themselves and having no time to be vulnerable. Is another form of dealing with a trauma. Is it another form of trauma? Narcissism would mean the child has a similar experience but creates a false self and represses shame. That would be the narcissistic solution for the same problem. And it has a fantasy defense. This would be the fantasy defense. All right, so the false self is living in fantasy. It's not rooted in real functioning. It's actually rooted in dysfunction. But the unconditional high performer that tries to develop mental callous, like David Goggins, is another form of these stress junkies, these workaholics, these, that's what it is. And some of them even don't do it to get money or recognition. They simply do it for feeling, for loving themselves probably, or as a replacement for loving themselves. I don't know. Or let me say it like this: they do it because they don't feel protected. There's nobody who protects them and there's nobody who nourishes them. That's why they have to do it themselves by functioning and therefore kind of not being threatened. It is something like that. Okay? Yeah. Glad I could lay this down. So I think it was well, when we talk about this vision that I had, the benefit of this experience was that I learned to cry again. But what I really should learn probably is, maybe I could at some point start to grieve for myself, for everything. But it does not have to be crying, not necessarily. But this is what people need, like David Goggins, to really become unshakable, because I think it's not the only solution to be hyper-functional and have mental callous. I think we are stronger when we allow ourselves recovery and processing our own wounds. Allow ourselves, nourish ourselves, protect ourselves in a loving way whenever we come back from the grind. Okay? So that's the message for today. Stay safe. See you in the next video.